Iran's economy is, well, it's one of the world's great paradoxes. Seriously, you've got a country that is somehow both incredibly powerful and incredibly vulnerable. And its potential, it's almost impossible to overstate. But, as we're about to see, having potential doesn't always mean you're going to have prosperity. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so think about it like this. On one hand, you've got this nation sitting on the largest combined energy reserves on the entire planet. It's got a perfect location for global trade, plus a huge, well-educated population. Sounds like a recipe for success, right? But then you look at the reality, and it's severe economic isolation, infrastructure that's literally crumbling, and a standard of living that's just a tiny fraction of its neighbors. The ones right across the Persian Gulf. So what on earth is going on here?
And that right there, that's the core question we're going to unpack. Why does this huge contradiction exist? It's a story of incredible advantages that are constantly clashing with some major internal mistakes and at the same time some really intense external pressures.
This vulnerability, it really all boils down to one thing: a massive dependency on oil and gas exports. Now look, that's a risky game for any country, right? Relying on just one super volatile industry. But for Iran, it's just so much worse, because for decades, it's been almost impossible for them to even sell the oil they're sitting on.
And that leads us to another crazy paradox. Because ironically, Iran's single greatest strength, all that unbelievable energy wealth, is also the source of some of its most crippling internal problems. How does that even happen?
And let's be super clear here, we are talking about an absolute ocean of energy. We're talking the third largest oil reserves in the world, the second largest natural gas reserves. You combine those two, and Iran has more fossil fuels under its soil than any other country on Earth, period. In theory, that should be a golden ticket to prosperity, but it just hasn't been.
There's this quote from our source material that just perfectly captures it. It's like, having all that potential is one thing, but actually living up to it, that's a whole different ballgame. And here's the kicker. Even before we talk about the problems with selling its energy abroad, Iran has a huge problem just using that energy for itself at home.
And this just perfectly illustrates that paradox, doesn't it? Here you have a country with nearly limitless natural gas just waiting to be used, and yet it can't keep the lights on. The country suffers from these long, drawn-out blackouts because its electrical grid is old, it's mismanaged, and it's basically starved of modern parts that it can't get because of, import restrictions.
Okay, now here's where it gets really fascinating. The government uses all this energy to support its people, and they do it with these massive subsidies. So what does that mean in the real world? Well, once you factor in the black market exchange rate, the real price for a liter of gasoline in Iran comes out to, wait for it, 5 US cents. 5 cents. That's something like 17 cents a gallon. It's practically free.
And, well, you can probably guess what happens next, right? When something is practically free, it creates some really, let's just say, strange incentives. This huge price difference has basically turned fuel smuggling into one of Iran's most profitable industries. I'm not kidding. People buy up all this super cheap, subsidized fuel and just truck it right across the border to sell for like a 2,000% markup. It's a huge business.
This chart right here really puts it all into perspective. It basically shows how much energy a country has to burn just to create $1 of economic output. And look at Iran. It uses way more energy per person than a country like Denmark, but it only produces about a fifth of the economic output. It's one of the most energy-inefficient economies on the entire planet, just a staggering waste of its single greatest resource.
All right, so of course you can't talk about Iran's economy without talking about the elephant in the room, sanctions. This one external pressure has pretty much defined the country's economic life for almost 50 years.
So what exactly are sanctions? Well, at their core, they're just restrictions that are meant to stop a country from trading. But their real power, their real bite, comes from how they isolate a nation from the entire global financial system. They make it unbelievably difficult to do any kind of international business at all.
Let me walk you through how it works in practice. So the US puts sanctions on Iran. This immediately forces every global company out there to make a choice: do business with Iran or do business with the United States, which is, a much bigger market. The choice is a no-brainer. And that decision just ripples through the whole system: banks, insurance companies, payment networks like SWIFT, until Iran is pretty much completely blacklisted from the global economy.
But, and this is the real twist in the story, you'd think everyone would want to fix this clearly broken system, right? But the surprising truth is that for a bunch of powerful groups, Iran's economic isolation is actually pretty convenient.
And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? If this whole situation is so bad for the average Iranian person,
causing crazy inflation, unemployment, all this instability. Why does it keep going? Well, the answer, as always, is you have to look at who benefits. And this table really lays it all out. First, you've got China, which gets a steady stream of cheap, black market Iranian oil. Then you have other OPEC countries who face less competition, and that helps keep global oil prices nice and high for them. Of course, you've got the smugglers we talked about, who are making a killing. And then, and this is a big one, Iran's own leadership gets to avoid making really risky economic reforms, like cutting those fuel subsidies, which they know could spark huge civil unrest. It's happened before.
But here's the thing. While this whole broken system might be convenient for a select few, it's built on a foundation that is just completely unsustainable. To put it simply, it's a ticking time bomb.
The reality is that this convenience for the powerful comes at a huge cost, and that cost is paid directly by the Iranian people, and those costs are just piling up, year after year, in the form of all these overlapping domestic crises that are just getting worse and worse.
I mean, just look at the pressure points. You've got decades of high unemployment. You've got this chronic, crippling inflation that just eats away at people's savings and their quality of life. And all of this has fueled a 50-year-long brain drain, where the country's smartest, most skilled young people just leave whenever they get the chance.
And that brain drain, it leads directly to a demographic crisis. Think about it. As all the young, productive workers leave the country, who's left behind? An aging population that the already struggling government has to support. And to make matters even worse, Iran has one of the lowest birth rates for a low-income country, which just means all of these problems are on track to get even more severe.
So at the end of the day, Iran is caught in a trap. You've got all these internal pressures building up, pushing the country towards a breaking point. But at the same time, you've got these powerful forces, both inside and outside the country, that have a real interest in keeping things exactly the way they are. The path forward is, well, it's anything but clear, and it leaves a nation with all this incredible potential stuck in what feels like a permanent state of crisis.